record on this computer. Recording. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Coach's Corner. It's been a minute since the four of us have been on here. I am in North Carolina. Hi.
Hi.
That's it.
That's what we're going with? All
What
right,
the
fine.
hell?
We started. All right. Who wants to go first with their questions?
How many
Great,
do you
I'll
guys
do it.
got? Where the fuck did
I
Maria
got
go?
a few.
What just happened? Was I was booted off.
She's not on yours?
She
She's
got
on
kicked
mine.
out. She's gone.
Oh, there she is. All right, we're good.
Jason.
All right,
she's
so-
gone.
I did forget
Question.
to take a screenshot of my questions. Even though I got like
Well, I mean,
one. I only got what?
You can swipe up for a second and do it as long as you're not more than like a minute or so. I think there's some sort of like time limit there, but I don't know. So
Oh, I remember them. I remember them.
how does the body react to a second prep versus a first prep? Or how might a body react differently from a first prep to a second prep?
So
Hi, Mason.
I think when your body will give more, you know what I mean? One, the more muscle you got, the more density, muscle maturity, stuff like that. So, but I think it also highly depends on how well you nail that off season in terms of your body comp and not getting, overly fat and having too much body fat. Because then you're going to need more time, right? And say you have too much or, you slip up a bit too much in the off season and your body fat's much higher at the start of the second one, and say you don't give yourself enough time, you know what I mean? Then you might not be even better. You know what I mean? Sure, you might see the size improvements and muscularity improvements, but conditioning might not be the same. But typically, if you nail everything 365, 24/7, typically the body's going to give more in terms of conditioning. Obviously, you should be bigger, have improvements on body parts, overall muscularity, and things like that. But usually that baby fat, like we call it, right, will slowly chip away the harder you diet for, consistent preps.
Yeah, I think it's a highly contextual question when it comes down to it, which is basically what Steve just said. I think there's you need a lot of context in terms of, like Steve said, the off season. I would say one of the more important things there too is like how long is the off season, right? We see a lot of people do their first prep, which is obviously where this question is around, and then they immediately want to go next year into a second prep already. And it's like, hey, you got to realize, like, especially if you're a female, the body is very adaptive. And when that first prep was months and months long, and you're only taking however many months as an off season in between, 8, 9, 10 months in some cases. And let's be real, if you're doing let's say the same show next year, right? So there's a 12-month turnaround between show times. That means there's a much shorter turnaround between months in which you've been dieting. God damn it.
I'm so sick and tired of this shit. For everyone listening on the recording, we were just kicked off the live.
That was super gay. I don't know why this happens to us.
What do are you going back on?
Yeah.
I'm so done.
All right, I'm live. All right. I know we need to be like politically correct, but that's gay. And I hate it when it happens every time. It's super gay.
I know.
But anyway, like we were saying, you got to take into consideration how long that off season actually is. And we're not talking from show to show. We're talking from prep to prep. And if the prep to prep period, especially for a female, is only whatever, a 7-month turnaround, an 8-month turnaround, like at the end of the day, at that point, you're asking for a lesser effective prep. You know what I mean? Just because that metabolism probably isn't going to be fully recovered at that point. You probably didn't put any muscle tissue on at that point, right? It's one of those things where you have to put into, a realistic concept there in terms of how long it actually takes you to fully recover from a prep and then actually start building muscle into an off season and get those calories up to where they need to be. All of these things matters as it relates to how effective that second prep is going to be. If it's done the right way, you could potentially have a more effective prep, as preps go on, because you've now learned from a mental side of things and from like an appetite side of things, like how to kind of like act and what to expect and all those different things. But I think it could be an advantage to the athlete.
Yeah, and just another thing to touch on, really around like the thought that Steve started and Tim expanded upon in terms of like the off season being so important. And there needs to be like actual time, right? Because your body is still recovering from your previous prep, or you probably had some type of metabolic damage. A way to make sure you optimize that whole recovery process of the shit behind the scenes, right? Is don't fuck up your rebound, right? I think that's probably the biggest thing downfall you could have as a bodybuilder is binging after your show, because then you're in this massive caloric surplus. You start to store a whole bunch of body fat really quick. Your fucking sensitivity goes out the door, and then you have to go back into a caloric deficit to fix the problem that you just created, and that's going to make your off season so significantly less effective. It is the worst disservice you can do yourself as an athlete. So to the original point, to make your next prep easier, don't binge.
What about you, Marie? I'm curious because your first prep was basically fucking immaculate, right? And then your second prep sucked balls, and then your third prep was immaculate again.
Yeah, I was going to touch on, I think, really environment, but also I do think that the birth control played a factor in, like, I don't know if it helped me my first prep. I don't know if there wasn't enough recovery time in between taking out the birth control and prepping again for that second show. But I do think like environment matters. And then also that second prep, I feel like the most important time during the prep was during like finals, which really fucked me. That second prep. So I do think environment, because obviously there's never going to be a perfect time to prep ever. But knowing I had failed 2 classes my first prep, that second prep, I was putting a lot more pressure on myself as far as education went, obviously. So I was just under a lot more stress and whatever. So I think that environment matters for sure, and like how much like stress you're undergoing. And then that, which also to the same point, that third prep or last prep was pretty smooth because I had all my ducks in a row. It was pretty smooth.
Oh, I got the next question, right? Hold on. Best way to take OTC subs, sublingual, liquid, oral, etc.
Wait, what subs?
Over
What
the
kind of
counter
vitamin
supplements.
is it?
Like
So
what
like
kind of over
your
the
general
counter?
vitamins. Yeah, I see. I think I don't know exactly, Bernard. If you're on, you could chime in on this. It was his question. I don't know exactly. So I think maybe what he's asking is essentially if you have the option for a liquid or a sublingual over a pill, which one would be better? Like, is one of those 3 better than another?
Hey, Sam.
So the answer is suppository every time.
Hell yeah. Now we're talking.
Honestly, injection. Go injection. Injection would be the best route there, and that's dead ass serious too.
In the
Actually,
ass,
a
though.
suppository probably
the
would
ass.
be more absorbable. We can give it a
My
shot.
creatine monohydrate up my ass. I'm gonna boost my creatine mono.
We'll
Johnny.
put Steve's. We'll lube up Steve's branched chain amino acids and start fucking testing his blood and see what happens.
Johnny told me taint shots are the most anabolic.
What is it? Take shots?
Taint shots, right in the goot.
Oh,
right in the gooch.
Taint, yeah.
I love the emphasis on that, Marina. Yeah.
I honestly, to answer the question, I honestly don't think there's going to be that big of a difference. I think the percentage of bioavailability of the substance is really going to it's going to be minute differences between pills.
I got a great idea. Just take the fucking supplement.
Yeah, what I would say though, for a lot of people is, make sure take it on an empty stomach. Unless there's a reason for you to be taking a pill with food, take it on an empty stomach. How important is beats per minute for cardio?
Very important.
Very, yeah.
This
Trying to get in
person
that fat burning.
brought up though. This person specifically brought up seeing people manage keeping their beats per minute so low during prep.
Why would you want to keep your beats low during prep?
So
Are
the
you
thought
saying like
process
during?
there-
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Is this specific to cardio or just like?
yes.
Oh, okay. So yeah, why would you want to keep it low during cardio?
The thought process there is the lower you keep the beats per minute, the more you're going to be able to save muscle tissue. So we want like low intensity cardio to have more of an impact on fat burning as opposed to burning through glycogen.
Yeah, I mean, how
Yeah, I know,
low
Coleman, this wasn't our
is the
conversation. This was
right?
actually another Bernard question, but Coleman just asked me a similar question in DMs too.
Yeah, so cardio should be hard, right? Like if you're doing low intensity steady state, I mean, aim for like no less than 125 beats per minute, because at that point you're barely even above like an out of shape person's resting heart rate. You know what I mean? So like I'm typically so for somebody like my size, I'm shooting for like 125 to 135 beats per minute,
Yep.
like during low intensity when I'm in a prep. That's another really important factor because you want to make sure that you're actually fucking working. Like you want to get close to your max heart rate on that. And that could be 180 upwards of 200 when you're seriously doing your hit as hard as you can, right? Yeah, it's my perspective on that.
Matt, how much you weigh right now?
It's 247 this morning.
Your heart rate is 125 when you're taking a shit.
Mine isn't.
I was
Mine
just
isn't.
picturing you with your heart rate at 200 and I was like, oh.
No, I couldn't do that
I-
now. I would die. My resting heart rate is actually not that bad. It's like 70, 75 right now.
But I
Pretty
mean,
good.
I think to just add on to what Matt was saying, I think honestly, in most cases, like if you're keeping your beats per minute that low during prep, either you're doing a shit ton of cardio, which is ultimately steps, right? Either you're doing a shit ton of that, right? Or you're suffering like a motherfucker on that diet, right? Which is going to happen inevitably anyway. But again, that might give you more reason to have to suffer earlier in the diet because the beats per minute and the intensity of your cardio is so low. And then again, the only time that I would see that being very applicable in terms of keeping the beats per minute super low during cardio all the time is if somebody has, honestly, probably an internal issue where they shouldn't be prepping to begin with. You know what I mean? Like the cortisol is too elevated or some sort of thyroid condition, like something like that, where the added stress isn't going to be beneficial. But I would just say, honestly, the only time I'm telling somebody to keep their beats per minute low is potentially when it's like an added cardio session. And I have somebody right now where I know they train at night and they have their second cardio session is post workout. But again, to Matt's point, that's where I tell them 130 to 150 beats per minute. And then his morning cardio session is 150 to higher beats per minute. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't know. I think that's one of those things where maybe people are going around doing it at the gym or whatever. And, maybe they got it from a cool name coach or something like that. But it just practically, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You know what I mean? Or logically to favor that.
How about during sex?
Sex depends.
Yeah, it depends if we're going for like 37 seconds or we're going for like 4 minutes.
Are we having a grown? Are we making love or are we fucking?
I mean, we do whatever you want, buddy.
What?
We
Oh,
can-
I feel like
I feel like I'm interrupting something.
Steve mozzarella sticks are back. So nobody has anything to add yet, right? Opinions on upper lower split training each muscle twice a week. Yes.
Say that again, Tim.
Yeah, it's great.
Opinions on an upper lower split training each muscle twice per week.
I think that's a good idea. Very good idea. I think like especially for somebody who's like a lifestyle person or a beginner to like somewhat intermediate level like lifter or bodybuilder, they're good, but like you want to get to a point as a bodybuilder where you're prioritizing your weak body parts, right? And that may not necessarily be the split for you, but I think if you're like a general person trying to get in the gym 4 days a week, that's a really good approach.
I'm with that. It almost like entirely. That's exactly what I would have said. Just like at the end of the day, and if anybody works with me, they know like my a training split for me isn't going to be like a typical like back biceps and triceps, shoulders. Like, I'm going to mix and match based on people's weak body parts. And ultimately, they might train their weak body part multiple times a week. I don't care if it's shoulders and back going together. If you need more delts, we might put some delts on that shoulder day a little bit just to continually touch it throughout the course of the week. But at the end of the day, that's one of those things where it's like, it's not going to work with an upper lower split. You know what I mean? Upper lower split could be great. I truly and honestly believe that if you train your ass off, right, and you do take the approach we talk about all the time on here, it doesn't fucking matter what kind of split you have. As long as you're hitting those things with intensity and you're hitting them multiple times a week, you're probably going to be fine. So I think it really could come down to, how well recovered you are, maybe what you enjoy, your schedule to a certain extent. But I think what Matt said is probably key for a bodybuilder. Like, you really have to look at what you need to prioritize and how how effective is it going to be if you're only hitting that, whatever, twice a week is what it comes out to, I guess. Right? Like, we might need a little bit more stimulus for that over the course of the week. And that doesn't necessarily mean more volume,
Right.
but again, you're spreading that over the week.
Right. And also too, just like to go like piggyback off of your guys' points, I think obviously everything but you guys said is I agree with. I would say just from a volume perspective, right? Just take into account if you're enhanced or you're natural, if you're in a cutting phase, a bulking building phase, whatever you want to call it, where your overall calories are, right? And then pay attention to your recovery based off of natural or enhanced, and then where the food's at, right? So if you have to pull back on volume, don't be scared to. If you have to take an extra rest day, don't be scared to, right? Like, don't be scared. Like, if you're, if you're a coach or you're just doing your own training, whatever, and you don't have a coach and it's like your Wednesday's an off day, programmed off day, but you need off, don't be scared to take off. That recovery day is everything, sometimes, most of the time, way more important than actually training, so.
I think the only bottleneck I thought of while you were talking there is, maybe for legs with an upper lower split versus like even doing a whole body split 4 times a week. Like, I think there might be a bottleneck for legs there, especially if you are training hard enough. Like, think about it. At the end of the day, you can't really disperse that load well enough for, like, I'm going to trash my quads, I'm going to trash my hamstrings versus if I did an upper body, I might be able to more easily split that load up around shoulders, chest, back, arm. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there
Right.
are more muscle groups to work for an upper body than a lower body in that regard. But you maybe end up with a bottleneck there a little bit versus
Right.
doing a full body split, just to split it up a little bit more as far as recovery is concerned. But anything you
Yeah.
got to add on that, Marina?
Mm-mm.
All right, last one for me is: are there any drugs or subs you absolutely wouldn't use with for this just says for a competitor? It didn't say contest prep or not, but they did ask specifically both for a female and a male.
If there's any drugs we wouldn't use,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not gonna ever touch DMP, or I'm never having anybody. It's just, to me, not worth it. You know what I mean? Like, that's definitely something.
I want to try DMP. Just want to see what happens.
Yeah.
I'm dead serious too. I genuinely want to try. I want to see what happens. Really low dosage, you know what I mean? Really, really low dosage.
You're crazy.
Yeah, but
that's one.
It's still in use now. Like, I know a couple of people who've used it in prep recently.
for sure. Yeah.
Sounds crazy insane. But yeah, I agree. DMP for sure.
I'm not gonna
The
have a
other,
female do trend.
yeah, I mean, it kind of goes without being said, all the super androgenic stuff, like, you're not going to put a woman on it. But the only other compound I'm really not a fan of that I wouldn't really recommend for anybody is equipoise. I just don't think the juice
I
is worth
hate
the
it,
squeeze
too.
on that one.
Fucking
Yeah, I
hate it.
mean, from a side effect perspective, anxiety from the potential risk of kidney damage, like, we're talking if you're probably running extreme amounts of it for very long periods of time, but nonetheless, I just think there's better compounds out there for sure. So it's something I rarely, if ever, will program.
I honestly, maybe I'm a little bit more, and I think I've probably spoken to this to at least some extent on here a couple of times, but like, I'm really not adverse to trying different things with clients. Like, I don't really know if I have something that's completely off the table. Obviously, there's caveats there, like for a female, like, Matt said, like, I'm not giving a female trend. I'm not going to go up to whatever 100 milligrams of test a week for a female or something like stupid like that. Given those things kind of being stupid and not really within any of our wheelhouses, I would say honestly, even things like DMP, whatever. I have a client on Equipoise right now. Like, I don't mind. I think when we're looking at lab work, when we're looking at the individual, when we're looking at history, I think there's tools for different outcomes, even for the same job, from person to person to person, and the environment needs to be considered in which we're applying these things. And again, if we're looking at somebody's, labs, and we're looking at somebody's, ability to be able to tolerate these things, and it's there, right? And it might be the best tool for this person to reach end result. You know what I mean? I'm not opposed to trying different things with different people. So it's one of those things where for me, I think I'm not like I don't know. I don't want to use the word like afraid or scared, because that's not, I think for other people, it's more like a sensibility thing. For me, it's just one of those things where, again, I think I look at so much lab work. I look at so many different types of labs. There's just one of those things where I do see the people that maybe are a little bit more resilient, right? I know somebody who probably wouldn't mind me saying who it is on the show, but I know somebody who legitimately abused drugs to the point where I'm like, hey, dude, I don't even feel confident doing this anymore. I'm not comfortable here. Right. And it's just, it was too much, too consistently for a long period of time. And I backed away from coaching this individual, although we still have a really strong relationship. And basically what it came down to was he felt perfectly entitled to do it because his blood work was immaculate 24/7. It's still to this day. I just spoke to him. Blood work immaculately consistent all the time. Echocardiogram, like everything's consistent all the times. And it's just sometimes people have that individual resilience where it's like, hey, they're going to be able to tolerate running maybe trend during their off season, where everybody else would say, oh no, you can't run trend during the off season. It's going to cause sleep deprivation, yada, yada, yada. Right. So again, for me, I think it comes down to the environment, the circumstances, and then, what is truly the best tool for the job. And I don't want to limit my tool chest. Question here from Joe is there anything better than BPC 157 for restoring gut health? Yes, TB 500,
tons.
but it depends on what the issue is. Yeah, there's TB 500, there's GHK is great. There is there's a whole slew of different peptides for gut health. Another question here is, this could lead to a good topic. You prefer higher frequency times per week, lower volume for weak body parts, or more frequency, more volume? Well, I would say first for more frequency is going to be more volume, right? Like those two things I think come hand in hand, which I guess is what he's saying. I think I prefer higher frequency, lower volume, which is exactly what we said. We were doing that a little bit there on the upper lower split. But yeah, I think most of us are in that camp, right, guys?
Yeah.
Where's that?
More frequency, lower volume.
Oh, yeah. I see.
All right, who's next with questions?
Last week, I think Caroline, was it Caroline? Yeah, I think Caroline asked me, would you put a client on stage that is not ready?
No.
I wouldn't, because I did it and I didn't like it.
Yeah, no, generally the rule of thumb, no, but I think we had something similar to this a few weeks back, and Tim, you brought up a good point about somebody who like had a very specific, they couldn't push their show back. They had like their wedding or something right after that, right? Honeymoon. Like that's really the only time, right? Like if I bring somebody in like 90%, like yeah, it's not the optimal outcome. But if they worked for the 20 weeks and they don't want to, miss out because they're having their honeymoon, like that's really the only instance I would do that. Because I mean, there's so many shows. Like just pick a later show. There's no problem with that at all.
Yeah, I think the difference there is that we're having the conversation with that client. You know what I mean? Like we're not egging that client on
Yeah.
to tell them like, yeah, let's do it. Like you're gonna get it. It's like a direct conversation where it's like, hey, just so you understand, you are not fucking ready for this, and the outcome's probably not gonna be what you want. And if it is what you want, you got lucky. We didn't win that show the way that we were supposed to win that show. You know what I mean? Or we didn't
Yeah.
get that placing based on the way that we should. So, having that conversation with somebody, I think, is ultimately the most important thing. But I would also say too, the only thing that I would add to that is 100, and this might be again a nuance, a caveat, whatever you want to call it. But like if somebody is going for a pro qualification, right? Like I have a couple guys where I'm probably not going. They're 100% not going to be 100% going into their qualifiers, right? Because all I want is that qualification. To be honest with you, I don't care if they take fucking second place. Bottom line is all I need is that qualification, and then I'll drive them that extra 15% into their national level show, and then have them step on there at 100%. You know what I mean? Like essentially, I don't want to waste 100%. But again, that's a caveat, I guess, in the sense of what their plan is, right? If that makes sense. They would be 100% per what we're trying to do, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying.
All right. What else?
Matt, how many do you have? How many more?
There's up to
Okay. Do you want me to read one?
yeah,
got-
so you want me to go?
Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead, dude. Yeah.
the one is, how can you help mitigate the risks of taking anabolics? What are some things you could do?
I mean, there's obviously a slew of health supplements nowadays, right? That like we're all aware of, right, as coaches. I would say too, keeping your blood pressure in check, I think is a big one, which would come down to obviously keeping body fat in check. You know, you don't want to get fucking over heavy. Finding, I guess, that sweet spot with the anabolics for what you're taking, like it might be a little too much and it's skewing blood pressure up or affecting sleep and things like that. You want to make sure kind of everything's like clicking. The blood pressure one though is a big one. Where I mean, I'm sure we all know people, that just don't give a fuck, and they just like blood pressure's through the roof. You kind of see their faces all fucking red all the time. And then when they tell you what they're taking, it's like, why, and then those health subs, obviously, right? You want to make sure you're taking something that's covered in like your liver, your kidney, your fish oils, heart health, something preventative for blood pressure, like we talked about before, cortisone, right? Telmisartan, things like that.
I would say lab work,
Well,
lab
yeah,
work, lab work, lab work. Get your lab work on a consistent and regular basis if you want to mitigate and not just lab work, be honest with yourself. You know what I mean? Be honest with yourself because everybody I've seen, again, I just talked about how many, labs we look at this point. Like, I feel like I look at like, I don't know, half a dozen things to labs every single week, right? And at the end of the day, I've seen people that are in their early 20s where there's HSCRP is fucking 10. I've seen fucking women with their testosterone in the 500s and higher. I've seen I've seen everything that you could possibly see through every single different demographic. And the crazy thing is, for every person that's completely and totally fucked, there's another person running twice as much gear that's 100% cool and ready to go. You know what I mean? And it's like, you have to be honest with yourself. If you're that person that's touching small amounts of gear and your estrogen's through the roof and your testosterone's only like 700, like you gotta start to put things in perspective here. You know what I mean? Like, if you're the type of person, again, where your HSCRP is through the roof and you never touch anything over 600 milligrams of gear a week, you got to be honest with yourself. You know what I mean? Like, there's a very real aspect of this, of honesty, right, and our individual resilience that we have, right? So before we get into like how to navigate or how to mitigate some of the side effects of antibiotics, sometimes side effects are different from person to person to person, right? And sometimes our ability to be able to withstand more of those side effects is minimal compared to the next person, and we just have to be realistic with ourselves. But also, all the stuff that Steve said, the other side of that is lifestyle, man. Like, fucking make sure you get your sleep. Like, if you're gonna fuck with fucking, all this different gear, like, why are you only getting 5 or 6 hours of sleep? Do your cardio on a regular basis. Like, eat a healthy diet. You know what I mean? Like, these things are prerequisites to health. We all know those things outside of bodybuilding, right? Like, we grow up and our parents teach us to eat our fucking veggies. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, you get into bodybuilding, it's just this wired concept of I can only eat white rice and chicken breast. And it's like, well, you're probably not doing yourself much of a service there from an overall health perspective. It might be healthier than the general American diet, but you're most certainly not fortifying your diet with enough as far as vitamins, minerals, and just overall support.
yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah. The other thing is, if you're enhanced and you're down the path for a bit, you should definitely get an EKG, get your calcium
Yeah.
score. Like I did, well, I didn't get a calcium score, but I got an EKG last year, and like I've only been running PEDs for maybe a little over 3 years, and like I already have some slight level of hypertrophy in my heart. Most athletes do, like even if you're not enhanced, you could be a collegiate athlete. Like triathlon runners, I usually have like pretty significant hypertrophy of their heart, but it's just something that you should be aware of as you're going down the path.
Yeah, 100%. Those are tests I see. People miss those all the time. But big tests. It's more than lab work sometimes in terms of blood work specifically.
Yeah, I just got the echocardiogram done like a month and a half ago, maybe month and a half ago, and the EKG. So everything looked good. So,
Nice.
but like Matt said, I mean, everybody from an athletic standpoint is going to have some type of a little bit of enlargement, right, from just that athletic side of things, right? But obviously, like that was a good one that Matt said. Like us getting that checked when you're using anabolics and such is really smart too. Whether it's every year or other, whatever, like but it's definitely wise to get it looked at once in a while.
Yeah, yeah, like I'm gonna get mine done every year now, just given the fact that I know I do have some level of hypertrophy. I don't know at what rate that may accelerate, right? Because if it jumps, like I'm not gonna fucking die just because I want to bodybuild, you know?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, fine.
yeah. That's why you got to have that base reference and then
Yeah.
work from there.
Well, when I turned 30, it was recommended. My dad's doctor actually told him to have me get it because my dad has a small, tiny heart, a hole in his heart that my grandfather that just passed
A
had.
tiny heart.
Tiny.
That's tiny heart.
So the doctor was like, well, I would tell your son to get checked too when he turns 30. So that's why I got the one echocardiogram last March. And then I just went again, a month and a half ago and got a check because that like scared the shit out of me. You know what I mean? And I'm like, fuck, that's hereditary. Like, that's not drugs causing it, but I want to make sure that like the years of steroid use and stuff didn't make it worse or anything, but they didn't find anything at all.
You know what a good point on this too is we continue to talk about it is don't wait for somebody else to tell you to get, like, don't wait for your doctor to run one of these tests. Right. Like, don't just rely on what the doctor's going to run at your annual physical, because that's just not enough from a bodybuilding perspective, right? Or a drug use perspective.
Right.
It's just not, like, you're not getting nearly what you need there from a real comprehension of how healthy you are or aren't. So just don't wait for somebody to tell you to do these things on a regular basis. You really got to that's your responsibility as an adult, as somebody that makes the decision to use these things. That's part of the process.
Right.
I think something that I wanted to touch on with this whole topic is just maturity. Like, you shouldn't be taking drugs if you're not mature enough to be self-aware enough to get all these things tested and be honest with yourself and not do it recklessly, which I know we've
Right.
talked about that, like, kids should not be taking drugs because you have to be responsible about it.
Right.
Yeah. Word.
The other question I have is what's your favorite PED?
And a
Master-
bar.
So recently it's been Master on E.
Really?
Yeah, dude, I feel great.
Masteron, what kind of vagina are you? You just want to get you just want to get a little bit more veins in your chest?
Yeah, bro, we're over 30 now, bro. Nothing matters, dude. We just have to
Careful.
we just
We're
can't-
over 30,
we
bro.
just
I've been
can't-
on the other side of 30 for 10 years, man.
Yeah, you're fucking 55, bro. Me and Matt
That's where,
need to
when I
just
was
look good
30,
as
I was like,
dads.
oh, I want to be a cautious Masteron user too. And then I turned fucking 35, 36, and now I'm like, fuck it, life's over anyway. Give me all the super draws, my pre-workout.
No, I would say MPP.
I mean, I think Trent definitely, but Trent Ace for sure. Yeah, but if we want to talk about like something you can actually run for an effective period of time, it's gotta be Primo.
Yeah, Primo or Master on E.
Fucking effective period of time. I'm still super draw. Every time you guys ask me this question, I'm
Tim's
going back
like,
to super
fuck you,
draw.
pussies.
I only have one option and it's Anavar and I like it.
Don't lie to the people.
Where's a good option?
Matt,
Yeah, Anavar is not bad too.
Matt
I
loves
I
it.
like
Oral-
I have muscle.
There's a reason why oral steroids were like abused for so long, and everybody liked to take oral steroids, and it probably blew out a lot of guys' kidneys back in the day. They're fucking great. They're awesome. They work immediately. You don't have to inject anything. You just fucking, pop a pill and you're good to go, man. And then fucking 25 minutes later, you got the meanest pump of your life in the gym. It's awesome. It's just, unfortunately, they're not, as effective as some of these other things that we're talking about, but nonetheless, they're still my favorite. All orals. What do you got, Steve? Kimberly?
Do you think 2 hours of cardio and prep at 6 weeks out is too much?
I think we did this one, didn't we? No?
What was the question? I wasn't listening.
All the questions are merging together at this point for me.
Yeah, we just talk about the same shit. Do you think 2 hours of cardio and prep at 6 weeks out is too much?
I don't think so. If it has
It
to be
all
done.
depends.
It depends, right? If like
Yeah, are you
I
fat?
think this is very simple, right? I think at this point, all four of us are have a good gauge when someone's 6 weeks out if they need fucking more cardio or not, right? We could all agree on that. If you need 2 hours of cardio, we're gonna fucking tell you to do 2 hours of cardio. And I think it's very important for a lot of people to understand that just because you're talking to somebody and they might only be doing 30 minutes or 45, or like this dude sees Matt win his pro card, and realistically, Matt, if we had more time and we knew we were doing junior nationals, he probably wouldn't have had to do over 30 minutes of cardio, right, Matt? But we obviously had to push it because we cut the whole prep in half, right? You can't look at shit like that. If you need 2 hours, you need 2 hours. You know what I mean? Like if sometimes you just need fucking more. And I think people compare too much. Like, well, this person's ahead of me and we're both, 8 weeks out and they're doing 45 minutes and you got me doing an hour. The bottom line is some people fucking need it. Some don't. Just do it. Just suck it up and get it done. Because the bottom line is you need to look ready the day of the show and whatever the fuck it takes to get there, you got to do. Just is the bottom line.
Bada bing, bada boom.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, like in a perfect world, it would be great if you didn't have to do 2 hours of cardio. Right? So you
Absolutely.
could always have that
Obviously.
we could have that conversation that we were talking about earlier, like, hey, do we push out the show? But
Yeah.
if either the decision is no, or you are within striking distance, like no, 2 hours of cardio at 6 week out is not something you should be afraid of, right?
No, and I also
Yeah, that's
think
exactly.
too,
I think that's where it's like right between you two is where it lands, where it's like both of you are 100% right in both regards, right? But it's like the person that needs to do 2 hours of cardio that's on point at 6 weeks out doing 2 hours of cardio, you got to do your 2 hours of cardio.
Yeah.
The other person that's at 6 weeks out, and now your coach is telling you, oh, we got to fucking do 2 hours of cardio to be able to make it to the show. It's like, well, then you probably shouldn't be doing 2 hours of cardio. You fucked up somewhere else. You are fat. You just need to make sure that you push your show out maybe 10 weeks instead of 6 weeks. Maybe not do 2 hours of cardio and actually, lock down your diet and do the things that you have to do to be able to prolong that and get the conditioning that you need. You know what I mean? So there are, I guess, two different scenarios there, but either way, both of you guys are right in that sense.
and I think too, just to piggyback off that, Sam, like a different scenario could be too, like say we're talking about like a female in this instance, right? Say at, I don't know, 12 weeks out, for example, you still got her eating 1,600 calories, right? For example, and she's doing an hour. I might even not be hesitant to be like, listen, I'm not touching your food, but we're up in the cardio by another 30, 45 minutes just so we can leave food where it's at, get moving. And then we're able to actually have you ready and scale back on the cardio going in the last few weeks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like that's all strategic going forward. Like that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's other people, like people want to consider, right? Like Matt starts a prep, right? Or Marina might start a prep and you have her carbs, or Matt's carbs might be 600 a day. And as soon as Matt's carbs drop even to 500, that motherfucker's dropping 10 pounds of glycogen and water, like within 3-4 days, right? Whereas somebody might need the whole first 4, 5, 6 weeks at 20 weeks out to even drop 10 pounds and get moving. You know what I mean? Because no matter what, some people just some people are just going to hold more body fat as perfect as an off season can go. Females, especially in their glutes, their hamstrings, their lower stomach, right? That's just naturally going to happen. Some people just need more of a push, and it's okay. It just is what it is, right? Competing is extreme, no matter which way we slice it. We're all going to suffer at some point in a prep. So,
Yeah. Only thing I'll say to add on to this too is like, because you made a good point, Steve, where you're like, I might up somebody's cardio 30 to 45 minutes. Like, you guys got to realize, for a lot of people, and I would say this is probably the more majority of people, like over 50% of people, if you push cardio up by 10 minutes, you're not really getting much of an outcome from that.
no.
And if you push cardio up 20 minutes, again, you're probably not getting that dramatic of an outcome from that. Like, sometimes you are going to need, especially if somebody's not getting it from an hour's worth of cardio to begin with, you might need to make more dramatic pushes as far as cardio is concerned.
It just is what it is, right? Like one of the girls doing Big Cat, I just put her cardio from an hour in the morning. She's literally doing 90 minutes a day now. And they're 13 weeks out. I'm like, you need it. It just needs to be done. You know what I mean? It is what it is, right? And they don't complain. They don't give a shit, but you got to do it. You know what I mean?
So real quick here, Joe is asking, how do you know when your client is done with a gut protocol? Like when they can use the bathroom without the morning sups to go, going more than once a day, no more bloating. I mean, all of those things could be applicable, Joe. Yeah, but there's a big, like, I would say, by and large, no, none of those things are how we would recognize it. We'd want to put it in perspective of, this person's, done this for whatever, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks, whatever we decide based on those initial labs, especially a GI map, that this person might need, right? Those are great signs that somebody can go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom more than once a day, no more bloating, but those do not mean, right, that whatever issue that was there is completely and totally gone. In fact, in many cases, I'd want to leave certain things in for a period of time thereafter to make sure that we're not dropping anything too soon and we end up with a little bit of a rebound or a relapse, because those things do happen.
Guys, I gotta jump. This was fun. It was good to see you guys.
Yeah, same.
Bye, Matt.
All
Do you
right,
guys,
I'll talk
do you
to you
guys have
later.
any other questions, Steve and Tim?
Yeah,
Well, Steve, yeah, I'm good, but Steve, I think has more.
Okay.
Well, real
Animal-based.
quick, Nick has a question. What is your guys' opinion on a animal-based diet with carbs for bodybuilding?
What does that mean? Like, don't we eat animal based? Like we eat
Yeah.
animals.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, Nick. You might want to you could like rephrase it if you want, Nick, because I'm not sure that we're 100% on the same page there. But if you're saying like an animal-based diet, like typical, an animal-based diet would be a typical chicken, ground beef, eggs, all different animal dairy, right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All that's animal-based products that we would typically do with carbs, like white rice, oatmeal, Ezekiel, whatever, all the different options. So that would be a very standard, typical diet for bodybuilding, unless you mean something different than that, Nick. What do you got, Steve? No problem, Joe.
How much sodium on each meal should I be putting?
How big are you? What's your sodium level in your labs right
Dude, I
now?
don't.
I'd say it ranges from person to person, anywhere from an 1/8 teaspoon of salt that I have people do with each meal, all the way up to a 1/2 teaspoon of salt with each meal, depending on where their sodium levels are at, what kind of muscularity they have, so on and so forth, like how much they sweat, what their adrenals are like, all that different stuff can factor into salt intake.
Yep. Do you use diuretics for peaking?
Depends.
Depends who it
Yes.
is.
Yeah.
Sometimes not. Like my guy for Universe, I didn't use anything. I just used H2O remove. I started it at 10 days out. He was doing 3 caps a day, but I
Did you
didn't.
notice a significant difference?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Well, he also had to make weight.
I feel like H2O remove is super hit and miss. Like the first time I used it, it was like fucking great. First few times I used it, I feel like it worked almost too much for one client I used it for, a natural client that I had. Like I was actually really impressed with it originally. And then it just turned into something where it was like, any other over the counter water loss product, which I don't typically expect anything. Like I'm not, illogical with it. But now, I've used it a couple of times recently though. Who was it? It was somebody recently where I felt like it pulled too much again. Was it maybe it was no, it definitely was a Shelly.
I mean, with
it was definitely
him,
somebody where I felt like it pulled too much again. So it's really hit and miss, I think.
with him with bodybuilding, I was like, you can't be too fucking dry. So, you know what I mean?
What? Oh yeah, it can't be too dry. Yeah, but I get worried about it driving flatness from pulling too much.
He was full. I pretty much had it like where I wanted his meals with carbs and fats and stuff nailed down. And his protein was super low, like super, super low because he gets some distension from his hernia. So like when I tell you low, dude, like Thursday, he made weight. He made weight at like 175. And then I started filling him out. His protein was like 65 grams a meal. It wasn't much.
Yeah.
It was just carbs, and he was doing about 65 to 70 carbs and about 12 grams of fat a meal. And I was just giving it was literally just a little bit of beef, some grass-fed butter, and rice. That's literally all we used.
Yeah, when did you send me those pictures? Was that from Saturday?
That was Friday.
That was Friday? Yeah, so he was ready at that point. All you had to do was
Yeah, it was
came in.
it was a cruise in. He looked good.
Yeah.
He got fifth, man. The most competitive masters classes I've ever seen.
Has been for a couple years now.
Bro,
Sure.
when the 35 heavyweights came out, I was like, damn, I got like 4 years to fucking nail this.
Yeah. Nick has another question here, but Nick, again, I'm not 100% sure on the question again. What would you say is most detrimental when it comes to blood work for testing growth? In terms of what would lower those numbers, stress would be the biggest factor there. So like if you're not getting enough sleep, your test will be low. If you're, when it comes to stress, we obviously have 3 of the largest pathways, and then I like to add a gut is the 4th. So if your gut is screwed up, your test could be low. If your food is imbalanced, like if you're eating too much food or too little food, your test will be low. Emotional stress will drop your test, and physical stress will drop your test. We want to be in a good balance with all that stuff to be able to have the best test and growth hormone output. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Good. What else we got here? I got 2 more. When should I pull back cardio and prep? So this person messaged me on the side too. I literally just was messaging them back before I got on here. I just didn't have time today. But they I pretty much asked them how much they were doing. So they're doing an hour and a half of cardio, and they said they're 2 weeks out. And
You got it.
I asked what they look like, and I never got an answer back. So I don't know.
I say, listen to your coach.
I mean, you could obviously there is a point where pulling cardio is not just like an applicable concept. It's probably going to be a necessity. Well, let's put it this way: it's definitely a necessity to bring your best physique. Like if you're not pulling your cardio at whatever 7 days out or something like that's usually a good sign that you're probably not ready for your show. I know some coaches like to keep things super consistent, so they'll take it down to like whatever a really low intensity recumbent bike and just have people stay to a very consistent concept there. But I would usually say, why? You know what I mean? Like why? I just don't know if that's really a necessity for anybody at that point. So yeah, I would say you want to pull cardio at some point, but again, that's not too early on there, right? Like it's just pulling it 3 weeks out when you still have room to go. Just if you don't need to, why are you pulling it at that point?
Yeah.
Right. But again, that's different for everybody. Like we've talked about with a lot of shit here today with cardio. Like cardio could be pulled for somebody fucking 6 weeks out. We just had a client compete all naturally, and the dude did like 10, 20-minute cardio sessions his entire prep. It just so happened that it ended up being like the last, whatever, 2 weeks of his prep that we used that to kind of run him down and actually deplete him prior to the show. So cardio is that thing that works in a lot of different ways for a lot of different people.
Sorry, I'm reading this question. I'll read it to you guys when we get off this live. How to lower blood pressure already taking telmisartan.
Oh, we did this one before too. You
Yes.
can always, on top of telmisartan, you could add in a calcium channel blocker, but you want to be careful adding on anything as it relates to blood pressure medication to other blood pressure medications. You got to realize these things have very real like interaction in the body, like something like telmisartan. Like, and if you added in something else, like something that is fucking, I don't know, what's common. Like you could end up with really high potassium levels at a certain point. Like you got to be careful with that kind of stuff. I would say if your blood pressure is out of whack and you're on a decent dosage of telmisartan, like 80 mg plus, or is it micrograms? Either way, bottom line is if that's not doing the job, you either need to look at, you need to look at something. You need to look at your lifestyle. You need to look at the amount of drugs that you're taking. You need to go see a cardiologist and have somebody actually work with you to get that blood pressure down. Maybe skipping the telmisartan and going with something that acts differently, like an ACE2 inhibitor, right? There's different reasons why your blood
beta blockers, yeah, they work well sometimes too.
beta blocker could work too. Yeah, but sometimes it might just be you need to affect what's happening there at a different level, right? Like, yeah, it might be like something completely totally different that's causing the high blood pressure.
That's all I got. You got any?
Nope, I'm all out.
Marina?
No, I can't remember the rest of them.
Sweet.
There was like one more, I think.
All right.
Alrighty. Thank you everyone for listening. We will catch you guys next week.
See you guys.